Okay, so the toilet is more important than Facebook. All right, that's a good way to start, Gopal. So what else? What else is going on in the world? What elephants are standing in the room?
The Grammys were last night.
Okay, and?
Was it Adele who swept? I don't know. I didn't
She
watch
got Best Album, yeah.
Yeah, and people were upset that Beyonce didn't win.
They were upset that Beyonce didn't win.
Yes, and it goes into racial issues that we go with the safe choice as opposed to the other kind of floating around the internet.
So people say Beyonce should have won. Didn't she give some sort of tribute song or something like that?
Adele.
And it didn't go well, and she had to do a restart?
Adele.
That was Adele, yeah.
Adele did, yeah, to George Michael.
Yeah.
And made them stop and then start it over. So.
Yeah, always drama at the Grammys. Yeah, good. Okay, so the Grammys, what else? Moad, I know you have a comment, but we're going to come back to you in a minute. Dana, go ahead. What do you got?
I read an interesting article in the Business Insider today where they did a double-blind test sending resumes to all of the top law firms in the country, and all of the resumes were identical, except they changed the extracurricular activities or the gender of the name.
Yes.
For bias. And they found that if you had more affluent-sounding hobbies, you were more likely to be hired. If you had less affluent-sounding hobbies, you were less likely to be hired, particularly if you were a male. But that if you were a female, even with affluent hobbies, that counted against you more than being a male would have helped you. And the reason that was given by a lot of these hiring managers, they said that, you know, a woman was probably not going to be dedicated to the firm, was probably going to, you know, want more benefits, you know, want reduced hours, drop out because of raising kids or something like that.
Okay, so you're saying it's another sign of inequality. Yeah. Yeah, we have a long way to go. In our ethics class, we just finished reading a book by Edward O. Wilson called The Social Conquest of Earth. And I haven't used that textbook in class before. And the students have had a good time, I wouldn't say swimming, they've had a good time trudging through knee-deep mud as we made our way through Edward O. Wilson. Wilson talks about why we are the way we are. And I wanted the students to read that first in ethics. And I'll relate back to what you just brought up, Dana, in just a moment. But I wanted the students to read it so that they knew where we come from. In ethics, in business ethics, which is the title of the course, we kind of start in the middle. And you say, this is how we should act when we're in business. But most of those who are doing studies these days to see if our leadership and ethics and project management classes are working are saying, no, they're not. People revert immediately to who they are as individuals, as human beings. We're not having any impact at all. We talk about the need for empowerment, positive leadership climate, and nurturing work environment and all this stuff throughout an entire semester. You pay good money to sit in these classes. And I'm paid to stand up here and talk about it and encourage you to talk about it and all that sort of thing. But the evidence is we're not having any impact. We're not having any impact at all. We get out to our jobs. We have, because of who we are as human beings, we've forgotten most of what we learned in class. And we end up operating by our gut, which is a really poor indicator, despite what Malcolm Gladwell says in his book Blink about trusting your gut. Yeah, you can get some good first impressions, but the fact is you need data to make decisions, especially in technical leadership, which is what you're training, which is why you're in this class. You need data. You need to make data-based decisions. And we don't do it. So I had him read this book. so that we could talk about who we were back when and why we are the way that we are and why do we have these built-in biases, you know, especially about tribes, who we are as tribes. And psychologists will tell you that different is dangerous. So Moad looks at me and says, Dan's different than me. Dan must be dangerous. You know, that's kind of built into who we are. So, which brings us back to your topic about gender and gender difficulties in our society. Edward Wilson would say we've built a Star Wars society with Stone Age emotions. A Star Wars society with Stone Age emotions, which means we are still acting on our gut based on what we learned 50, 100, 150,000 years ago. And we were stuck with that for that 150,000 years, except for the past 60 years, maybe 100 years. Okay? Then we began to think, you know, there's another segment of our society that ought to be playing a part in the decision-making process. In fact, many social psychologists would, Julie, start, I'm sorry, Moed, start that going around. Sorry, man. So maybe we ought to start thinking that there's another sector of our society that should be playing a part in the decision-making process. And many social psychologists say that the balanced society is a more healthy society. Meaning that the male tendency toward picking up a stick and fighting in response is good. It's good when that is leavened by some rational common sense. To put it in Dan Moore's definition of someone who said that more elegantly. So we haven't figured it out yet. We haven't figured it out. Which is why one of the reasons that we're trying, that the leadership of our program recognizes that that's true, and we're trying desperately to increase the enrollment, especially at the graduate level, in this program, because more people need to hear that, and they need to go through our ethics class and our leadership class so they get it, so that maybe if we do a really good job of providing a good learning environment, people will get it and we'll take some of that away with them. Maybe we'll put, at least people will begin to appreciate that there are other perspectives that should be paid attention to. So your comment is a good one. Thank you. Sorry for the long response. Melanie, you had a comment a while ago. You had your hand up.
I it does tie into other perspectives. You know, that the different is seen
as dangerous?
You know what I mean? So they stick with the known.
Yes.
So I feel like that's an example.
Yes, good one. Thank you. Nina, please.
So I lead a women's group in my organization.
Good.
And one of the things that we're doing this year is developing unconscious bias training. And we're meeting with coaches, and the first thing they told us, it's not about gender. It's just naturally how we are wired from hundreds and thousands of years ago. And one example that he gave was when you pretend like you're a caveman and you walk into a cave and you see this scary tiger. You're not afraid of him because he's orange. You're afraid of him because he has big teeth. And one of the things that also came there was if a manager is recruiting someone, if there's a pool of candidates, he will most likely choose someone, he or she will most likely choose someone that's most like themselves.
Absolutely.
No matter what the gender is, diverse, no matter what the case is. So it's not even just about gender, it's just a little bit bigger than that.
It is. Management reproduces. They reproduce. They clone themselves through the hiring process. It is so true.
That's not always a
That's
good
why
thing.
cultures are hard to change. Cultures are incredibly hard to change unless you change the CEO. If you change the CEO, then the chief CEO, over the course of 20 years, can change the culture of that company. Why do they say it takes 20 years?
Because that's how long it takes for people to die off.
That's how long it takes for people to die off. That's exactly right. That's how long it takes for people to die off. Yes. And you have to get rid of the previous generation. I mean, I'm having a faculty and staff meeting on Wednesday morning, and we do this twice a semester. And it's, you know, we give breakfast. We have breakfast, which is kind of nice, and you know, I stand up and we talk about things. One of the things I have to bring up is something that's not going to make people very happy, and it is this continuing thing, although we haven't had any incidents this semester, where people my age carrying their biases into their classroom presentations. And that's just not acceptable anymore. Meaning that, so I give an example in class, right? Let's say I'm talking about CEO. So Faisal is our CEO, and Alex is his administrative assistant. And then the next lesson, I talk about something similar, and I create the same paradigm, built-in paradigm again. And that's just not the way the world works these days. You know, there's a significant percentage of major corporations, companies of all sizes, led by both men and women. But if you carry that paradigm forward that we learned as children from the example, my age group, set by our parents and by that other parent called a television, the third parent called a television, which taught us through shows like Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith's Show, Bewitched. I mean, the list goes on. Always with the paradigm, you know, and the relationship with the man and the woman, which was fine for that day and time, but that doesn't exist anymore. That is a reality that has disappeared, and thank God for it. So I have to bring that up at my faculty and staff meeting. I know the kind of looks I'm going to get from the team. You know, like, why are you telling me about this? Who do you think you are? You think you're the best teacher around here? You know, that's the kind of looks I'll get. But hey, that's part of the game if you're leading the group, right? So yeah. You know, hiring is something we talk about in some other classes, and it is incredible. It's an incredible what we do. We make so many decisions based on resume, and then we make a lot of decisions based on the interview, and we ask the same questions over and over in the interview, and you'll make the same mistake. I wish we had time for a class on hiring. Google has figured it out. Some other companies have figured it out, where they ask questions that are not related so much to a person's past education and things like that, but they ask questions related to an individual's potential, to their potential, and how they'll fit into the culture of the organization. Those questions are far different than what we normally ask. What's like, describe a situation where, you know, where you were faced with a significant challenge and you failed. You know, and you're supposed to answer that question. And so we all just say, well, I was faced with this situation, and, you know, I'm a workaholic, and I spend all my hours at work, and I work really hard for my company because I'm really loyal, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, I turn the negative question into a positive answer. You know, I mean, come on. It's like shake and bake. You know what shake and bake is? It's where you put the chicken in a plastic bag, and you put the flour in there, and you shake it up, and then you put it in a pan and put it in the oven. And it's shake and bake, okay? So it implies that we already know what the answer is before we ask the question. That's what it means. So, please, somebody had? Nina?
Real quick, so last week I was in the interview process to hire someone new for our company.
Yeah.
And there was down to 2 candidates, and one had everything, all the experiences and education required, and the other one didn't, but wanted to learn and was super ambitious and was very confident and awesome. And my organization chose the one with experience, not the one for potential.
Yes.
Discouraged because...
Yes. And why do we do that? Because the risk is less and the workload is less for the supervisor. In other words, the one with more experience is seen as what we would call a fire and forget missile. You just push the button, they go, and they do work, and they produce, and I don't have to worry about them. More important, it's like somebody knocked on the door. That's probably Publishers Clearinghouse with my $10 million check. And so I don't, as a leader, a manager, I don't have to put any leadership into that person. Ideally, you just turn them on and off they go. Go do great things. That's what all my bosses have ever said. Just go do great things. Horrible guidance. But we might have missed a real nugget of gold in the process. It's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. The only way to change it is either change the CEO or start your own company, unfortunately. Or maybe you run into a boss who has a different paradigm that drives them, and then you can make that happen. Yeah. So, what else is going on in the world?
There's the evacuation in California.
Diana, the what now?
An evacuation in California because of the dam.
What happened to the dam?
That broke.
Who did? A spillway broke. I'm sorry, I don't know this story.
The dam overtopped. Too much water.
In California.
And a spillway broke, and is it leaking? Is it rushing down the valley, or what's happening?
Russian.
And what is this? What dam is this?
Orville.
Orville, something.
Okay. All right. So it had too much water in it.
It's because of the rainfall and all that. It's because of the
compromised before.
Say again?
It was structurally compromised before. So
Yes.
they started the evacuation early, and they were trying to lower the water level to save it from actually having an issue.
But it had an issue.
118,000.
Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
There was like
Aditya?
the emergency spillway and the normal spillway, though, both were like damaged. The normal one had a hole, and the emergency spillway had like erosion going on.
Yeah.
Because of the past rain of the last month, the water's like overflowed, and they have started the evacuation.
And so how do you fix something like that? You can't really turn off the water, can you?
Apparently, they're trying, like a lot of helicopters are flying by and throwing down rocks into the eroded area. I don't know how much is going to work, how long it's going to last.
So we're dropping rocks trying to plug the hole?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's cool. All right. Very good. Well, we got a few more minutes. Megan? Thank you. Aditya?
3 federal judges refused to reinstate Trump's immigration ban.
The 3-judge panel,
Yeah.
since we last met, refused to reinstate the immigration ban. I thought you were going to bring that up, Moad.
Yeah, I want to say see you in the court.
Yeah. See you in court, in all caps. You know, and they had a great, no matter where you look, no matter, people, what's amazing is we're in Boulder. If we were in another part of the country, people would be complaining that the judges, maintain or disregarded the administration's attempt to, their administration executive order. So, Saturday Night Live had an interesting response to that. Did you see the news that when they were doing the news on Saturday Night Live, and the one fellow there said, he said, baby, he said, you really don't say to judges you'll see them in court because that's where they are all the time anyway. So I thought that was a pretty good response on Saturday Night Live.
Then Trump went to, they had, the Trump character, Alex Baldwin, went to court, People's Court. You see that? So, yes.
The People's Court, yes.
People's Court.
Yes, yeah, they had the People's Court on there. This is again, as we discussed before, this remains a very divisive, how do you say that word? Divisive? Very divisive event, decision in our nation's history. This is a tough one for us. There are a lot of people out there who are afraid If you listen to NPR when when they're interviewing the people, and this is the last topic, and then we'll get back on our subject for this evening. They're interviewing a gathering of people of a certain political persuasion at a local restaurant, and they get together every so often, right? And there are people there with attitudes that are alien to, at least to my perspective. And these people, honestly, truly believe that, which makes for some excellent discussions in our ethics class. Because it is possible for two people with an educated background, rational, to have opposite opinions on a single issue like this. And what's crazy about democracy is that that's what it was meant to be. It's just really unusual. I fear the time, if it ever comes, when we can't disagree like that. And, have people on one side of a line with signs saying one thing, and people on the other side of the line having signs that say another thing. Because ultimately, I think that's what makes our country great. Michael Douglas said it great in that movie, The American President. You ever see that movie? If you haven't seen that movie, it's a great one to rent, take home, and have a pizza with it. The American President with Michael Douglas. Came out in the 90s, I believe. And, he's making a speech at the end of the movie as in the character of president. And he says, democracy is difficult. Democracy is really difficult. Now, we don't live in a true democracy. We live in a representative democracy. We elect those who can keep their eyes on the state of the nation all the time while we get on with the rest of the business. But it is difficult. So someone is burning an American flag, and you have to stand there and watch it because that's their expression of free speech. It's just really difficult. And from an ethics standpoint, it is clearly possible to have two reasonable people, both of them highly educated, both of them with exactly opposite opinion on these issues. Ultimately, I think that's what keeps us healthy. Not that you might, or any of us might believe that what one side stands for is correct and the other side is wrong. But there's one other point, and I'll make this point. I think you'll find it interesting, and it's a plug for the ethics class. We were showing a film in there the other day, and there was a gentleman out of Stanford and MIT, good educational background, doctorate, neuroscientist, who's writing about social issues that we face at this day in our nation. And I'm trying to remember the name of his TED Talk. But what he says is this, it's that, there are, even though two people can have exactly opposite opinions about a certain issue, it is possible to state that one of them is wrong. There are people out there who will say that sexual harassment is okay up to a certain point. Others of us say sexual harassment, whether man to woman, woman to man, doesn't matter, is wrong for a variety of reasons. And we as a culture, as a human culture, should be willing to say, enough. Let's draw the line and just all of us say sexual harassment is wrong, and if you're on the outside, you're wrong. So, anyway, I offer that up as food for thought. So, tonight we were going to talk about organization. And I have to tell you, I walked into Ball Aerospace, a new graduate of CU, in 2000. And I walked in, and I was given, even as a senior systems engineer, I was given a project to lead. It's a brand new project. It had to do with, at that time, called the NPOS spacecraft. It was a combination of Department of Defense and civil weather satellites all in one. We were going to combine, we were going to save money. It was part of an executive order under Bill Clinton. And so I was leading the space environment part of this. Alex has heard this story before in the systems engineering class. And what was interesting is that I was running a project, but I also had all these other people with fingers in my pie. They would call up members of my team, and they would just poof, disappear and go away. And these people were called functional managers. Okay? So somebody from electrical engineering was holding a training session for all electrical engineers, and my electrical engineer, on a couple days before a presentation to the customer, they would just go poof and disappear. And they weren't around. And the same thing happened with structural and many other parts of the team. And so I began to wonder, not having had this class, I began to wonder, who the heck is this person, and how can I go find them and spill my coffee on them? Turns out that they're known as functional managers, and they are part of a functionally organized company. So, you all have done the reading. Can you think of an example of a functionally... I'm going to ask for your questions and comments in a minute, but I just want to make sure we have our vernacular straight, our language straight. Of a functionally organized company. Functionally organized. Pardon me. Can anyone think of an example of that? How about, I don't know, is a department store functionally organized? Is H&R Block functionally organized? I don't know. Can anyone think of an example? Functionally organized. That is, they have no projects, but they have all these functional areas that contribute to the product or service. Gopal?
Hospitals.
Hospitals. Describe that.
So you got department of this and department of that and department of something else, right? So
okay.
All the people, only their work functions are primarily on that department.
Okay, so if you got this problem, you go over here. You got this problem with your knee, you go over there. You got a problem with your liver, you go over to internal medicine. And so each of them is a functional area with its specialists that will gather around you and work on you if you have an issue. Okay, thank you. I think that's a really good example. Ann?
Actually, I would say that hospitals are a team approach.
Okay, go ahead.
If I have a thing and I've got an endocrinologist, I have a neurosurgeon, I have a surgeon, and I have a GP, all of these are going to be interacting and talking with each other, and they are all going to be emailing each other, and they are in a project which is me.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the outcome of the project, it's a temporary endeavor.
Yeah.
It's in support of the customer.
And I'm the project.
And the end of the project, it's
Yeah.
a temporary endeavor. Hopefully it's a temporary
Yeah.
endeavor. Yeah. So you say there's actually a project face to hospitals.
And maybe that's because I belong to Kaiser, and that's the way
Okay.
Kaiser is organized.
Interesting. Okay. What do you think, Gopal? Do you defer to Ann?
No, well, it depends.
I mean, you can have functional organizations, like the example that I just gave, but they can come together for a project, for a cause, right? There'll be cross-functional interactions,
Which is
get a certain project done.
sounds like pretty much the definition of a project. All right. Good. Other thoughts, please? Julie, what do you got?
I work for OIT, and I think that they're a functional. They're very siloed up, and each area does its own thing without a lot of communication back and forth. But
Right. Well, there's a fellow over there named Brent Phillips who teaches this course once in a while, and he is do you know who he is? Brent Phillips he runs the PMO, the Project Management Office over there. And he's got maybe 150, 200 projects that he's working on. But that's just they're over there in the project area.
and somebody else
Okay. But otherwise you see it as siloed.
is very siloed.
Okay. All right, good. Please. Other thoughts? Megan, coming to you, Alex.
The university, I work for Jewish Studies, and we are Jewish Studies, and we kind of function in our own little silo. And then if I need help with fundraising, or if I need help with
my finances, or if we want to interact with ethnic studies, right? We kind of can we can team together and do projects, but at the end of the day, I work for one unit and I report to one boss, and projects are kind of side notes.
So in an educational institution, in most departments, you have people that, in other words, we don't have a team teaching this class, right? We have one person teaching the class. All right, very good. Thank you. Alex?
I was going to say that Boeing, interestingly enough, seems to be pretty siloed, at least in certain areas of it. I worked on a project for them last year. Yeah. And I quickly discovered when one of their designers sat down with one of the test engineers for the first time, which was our client, was the test engineer, that they had not talked. They had probably never really talked until that meeting, and they seemed to be very siloed out into their individual kind of areas, which I thought was interesting.
Interesting. So you're saying, in your experience, that appeared to be siloed or maybe functionally organized. Yeah. Okay. All right. Mark?
I was going to say service-oriented organizations like functional.
Okay.
Now, I kind of, back to the hospital thing, see both sides. The emergency room I could see as a project focus side. Yeah. But everything else, they're like, the DMV, here, the DMV.
Yeah. And they'll give you your place and your,
but,
and take your picture,
Yeah, banks and service type.
Okay.
People have certain roles.
Good.
They do one thing.
Good.
Organizations like Boeing or Ball Aerospace, I would say, have functional groups, project focused. And that's
functional groups are project focused. All right, please, Ann.
Anything that's mass produced, like this pen.
Okay.
There's an accounting department. There's a production line. There's someone who's buying the parts.
So if it's a manufacturing organization is not creating new projects, or at least that part of the organization that's doing the manufacturing, everybody's got their. It's an operational.
It's an operational,
It's an operational type organization as opposed to a projectized organization. Please, Abdul.
I believe engineering design offices, like for example Jacob or Wally Parson. Yes. They are segregated based on functions, civil, electrical, mechanical.
Okay.
So they only comes together when there is a project has cross function between those two groups.
Good.
Otherwise, they're just like designated for their function.
Good. Good examples, everyone. Thank you, Abdul. So, please, Faisal.
So, should it be a profitable sector?
Should it be a what?
Profitable.
Can a functional organization be profitable? Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
What about airports?
Okay, so you're asking if airports are functional or projectized. What do you think?
What I see actually that a lot of staff from different companies, airline companies, they work together to achieve a task.
Okay.
Flight,
All right, which is a flight.
Yeah. Then after achieving that, they will report to their own mother company, and that's it.
Interesting. So at an airport, or let's just say in airlines, the team that gathers together to get people from one place to another includes what? Maintenance?
Mm-hmm.
Maintenance, getting the plane ready, the food service people that got to come load up the plane, the security people to secure the aircraft on the runway.
And they're not supposed to be from the same company.
Yeah, or even if they are from the same company. But what you're saying is they all gather together in order to get that airplane off the ground. You got the pilots, you got the flight attendants, you got the baggage handlers, you got the people in the tower, that work for the Federal Aviation Administration. So what you're saying is that all those people come together in order to get that plane, or get the passengers, the customers, from one place to another. So would you call that a project?
Yeah.
It's a temporary endeavor to satisfy the needs of I'm sorry, Ken? Different example?
No, I was kind of basing off of what you're saying. I think it's kind of dependent on what you're looking at when you're talking about an airport. think if you're talking about like an airline, like an airplane itself, then you can deem that as kind of a project. But I think if you're running the airport, like DIA itself, I think that is very operational, and that falls more into kind of like a functional situation. Because the people who are cleaning, the runways are always going to be cleaning the runways. They report to the same manager.
Yeah, and they're not going to create a multifunctional team or a multidisciplinary team in terms of meeting. I don't know, the de-icers are kind of that team to get the airplane off the ground. But you're saying the people who clean, there are functional elements to running an airport, probably more so than any sort of project.
Right. I think if it's strictly running the airport to make sure planes are capable of landing, taking off, your goals are always consistently the same thing.
All right. Good question. Thank you. So let me ask you this. Can you think of organizations that are fully projectized? We're going to go from one end of the spectrum to another, and then we're going to look at the middle. Organizations that have nothing but projects inside of them. Dana?
Anybody that does consulting, of various sorts, engineering consulting.
Okay, so teams are formed to provide consulting support for an organization, or can be.
Yep, you get a project, pull your resources, do the project.
Good, good. Thomas, thank you. Dana?
I was going to say consulting.
Oh, darn, okay. She got there first. All right, consulting. So good, that makes sense. Faisal, please.
Construction companies?
Construction companies. What do you all think about that?
No, you said Jacobs and people functional things. I think they're pretty.
Who is?
Construction companies.
You think they're project-based? Okay.
Yeah, and you could go all the way down to landscaping companies.
Yep.
They'll hire their guys once they get the job.
Yes.
Or
right. All the specialties that are needed, they gather together for a temporary period of time in order to accomplish a task for a customer, meet a customer need, and then they get to the end state, and then they disband.
That's what Mortensen's did.
Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Good. Construction company. Nina?
Event planners.
Event planners.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Okay. And they'll gather together all the specialties needed. Listen to, I keep repeating the definition of a project, so make sure you know that. It's a temporary endeavor to meet the needs of a customer, gathers together people of various specialties, and then at the end of the project, they're released. Good. Event planners. Other thoughts?
What about
Diana?
a newspaper?
Say again?
A newspaper where you have financials, sports. But you
Wow, a newspaper. That's a good one. Is a newspaper project-oriented or is it functional?
We say.
That's an interesting question.
That's the mix.
Say again?
That's the combination between the two of them. I don't know.
Combination between the two? Well, you have specialties, and they gather together. Let's say it's a weekly, okay, a weekly newspaper. So they gather together for a period of time. They go off and do their jobs. The sports person does their job. The business person does their job. The person on the street person does their job. The schools, the government, they have representatives that gather information in all those areas. Then they gather together and they create their articles and put them in the paper. Somebody organizes it and gets it all laid out, and then they have distribution and it gets delivered to wherever. So is that a project?
I would say so.
You think so? What do you think, Julie? You look thoughtful.
It's an ongoing project. I was just trying to think of how to tie it in with software development, because my husband does software development, and so they'll do part of a deliverable, and then they'll get all mixed up and reassigned to another project, and they'll do a different aspect. So.
Right.
Part of a longer goal, kind of what you're saying. The goal is the newspaper, and to get going, you have to do this weekly.
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, it depends. You talk about software development. And the thing that separates a project from an operational system is the operational system. You may have different people managing, in Ann's description, different parts of a manufacturing line, but they're not. It's an activity that is ongoing for a long period of time without necessarily a specific and variable customer along the way. So if your software team were working, in my opinion, were working for the same customer all the time, just turning the crank and doing the same thing all the time, that would be considered an operational type setup. Whereas a project is a gathering for a special purpose, only lasts temporarily, and then it disbands. So, good question. Please, Megan.
I just have a question kind of related to that in terms of repetition. So with a newspaper, you do the same thing every week. Mm-hmm. So does that make it operational, or because you're producing a product at the end that's different essentially every week, is it a project? So I guess I'm still struggling with the idea of if you're doing similar things every week but producing something different or for somebody new, is it project or is that operational?
Melanie? Thank you, Megan.
As a former newspaper person,
okay.
Real reporter.
Good for you.
Thanks.
We need more of you. We need print. We need people getting subscriptions so that they can keep up with real news. Yes.
Well, from my experience, I would say it's still very functional because you're doing the same process every week. You're interviewing X number of people. Whether the topic changes or not, your editor has their role, your designer has their role, you work with the photographer, and
yes.
yeah, that might be a team, but your role is always the same, and it's relentless. It's never going to be different. It's never going to be a different project. Your role is to produce X number of stories.
Interesting.
Every story has X number of people. It follows a formula. If it's, it has a standard, an industry standard of how it's written. So.
Right.
In my opinion.
So you would say it's more operational?
Yes.
Okay, good. San?
Anything that's grant funded.
Anything that's grant funded? Yes. Team is built.
The grant.
For the purpose of the grant, satisfy the needs of the customer, temporary endeavor, has an end date, deliverable.
Yeah.
Good. So here's the last question, which has probably already crossed your minds a couple of times. Is this really important? Do I need to be able to separate every human endeavor into either project or functional? No, not really. The purpose of the discussion was simply to help to highlight the differences. You can come down on either side of the fence in terms of whether a newspaper is a project that has a deliverable each week. It's different. It's different deliverable each week, but in some ways it's the same deliverable each week. And so is it something akin to an assembly line, except we got to go gather the parts? We've got to go out and harvest the parts and bring them back and then put them into the assembly line and turn out this paper? Maybe so. The purpose is to, in our minds, draw a distinction between what might be classified as a project and what might be classified as functional, because those two distinctions are going to be important in the slides that I show here in just a moment. Let's see. Can you have both? In fact, let me stop there. I never gave you the opportunity to jump in with your questions and comments on the lesson. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll take a break. Any general comments or questions? We had some other articles also that were part of the reading, if you had time to read it. I recognize there was difficulty in the links related to Lesson 4, and I've fixed those, but I need to, there's more work that needs to be done on the course. So I'm going to be making changes to future lessons in the same way I made changes to Lesson 4. I hope everyone found, for those of you who in here who provided written comments, and for the distance students, I hope you went to the communication area of D2L, and under that you find drop-down menu under communication. You found discussions, and you could record your written comments there. So more changes coming to our future lessons, which will make our classes more, and your homework, more exciting and enjoyable. Gopal, what was your comment?
So going back to this organization, between the three classes or types that they discussed, the functional, the projectized, and something in between.
Called a?
The matrix, the hybrid.
Okay.
The question is there a type that's suitable for a certain type of industry?
Good question.
Is there a formula to it, generally speaking?
Okay. So the question is, if you're setting up a company, and let's say somebody choose a company that's not aerospace, since we're surrounded by aerospace. Is there another company around here? Staples. How about Staples? Or Target? Okay. So you're setting up a company like that, and you're trying to decide whether it should be projectized or functional. And so the question is, what would cause you to choose one over the other, or a matrix organization? But before we get there, somebody define matrix. Ken, please.
And it's like what Gopal said earlier, it's a hybrid of both, where you have both a functional manager and a project manager. And they basically oversee the different disciplines to a certain extent. However, that does break down even more where you have functional managers who are in charge versus project managers who are in charge, and who gets to make the ultimate decision on what each, team member is doing at a given time.
It's also the balanced one.
Say again, a little bit louder.
There's also the balanced one where they're equal in terms of power, the functional. And
there is, and therein lies, the devil's always in the details. Have you ever heard that before, Moad? The devil's in the details. Faisal, what does that mean?
You should dig more.
Yeah, exactly. It means that it looks good from the top, but when you look a little bit deeper, it gets more complicated. So, yeah. So here are 4 projects, project 1 through 4, and here we have functional managers. We have a specialty A, B, C, D. This could be electrical, structural, power, propulsion. It could be using the construction concept. This could be roofers and electrical and concrete specialists and some other specialty like this. And so we have functional managers, people who oversee the electricians and the people who are good with concrete and mortar and other specialties like that. But then they gather together. We get one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these, and it allows us to build a house or build a spacecraft or something like that. So the challenge comes in here. And who's boss? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Not only the problem, but we're going to spend some time talking about the solution. And that's where the value from tonight's lesson will come from. Because ultimately, since we're talking about project management, as a project manager, you want to get what you need when you need it so that you can keep your project on schedule and on budget. Those words become very important to a project manager. That's how everybody in the company describes you as a project manager. Can they keep their project on schedule and on budget? To do that, you're going to need their help. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a matrix organization. And so Gopal's question is, I'm building a company, and which one would be better? My answer to your question is that it requires analysis on the part of whoever's setting up the company, or if you're taking over a company, or if you're generally taking over a company. You're not going to have a matrix organization generally inside smaller elements in the company as a whole. But huge arguments occur at the executive level as to the balance between these two. Does the project manager, are we a project company, with focus on servicing our customers, or are we a functional organization because it gives greater efficiency to the company? Huge arguments. And companies will shift back and forth between saying we are balanced more towards projects or we're balanced more towards functional. Good question. And so the answer is, I don't want to say it depends, but with appropriate analysis on where one's focus is. With projects, we're focused on, generally speaking, we're focused on satisfying the needs of the customers. That can be a good thing. But the functional part of the company provides internal efficiency and cost savings for the bottom line.
So I guess going back to the construction example, like building a house, you need all these different skill teams, right? Basically framing, electrician, water, plumbing, or whatever, right? So at the end of the day, if your company is just building houses, you need a mixture of a functional and a project, or like a hybrid environment, to optimally use the staff that you have to build enough projects or enough houses. So you've got to come up with a business analysis of that from a HR standpoint, I guess, in terms of what is more efficient.
In construction, many of these specialists operate independently and can be hired for a project and then let go. It's for that reason, speaking specifically of construction, that municipalities and states have established standards for each of these areas, electrical, and all the rest, okay, have established standards so that when they're hired, as the project manager or the general contractor, that this person probably has a certain set of skills, and so you hire them based on their certifications. And sometimes you might have companies that are nothing but electrical. It depends on what the market will bear. And so these people may be independent electrical contractors putting themselves and their services up for bid, hoping that the general contractor will hire them. Please, Megan.
I have a question regarding, does size of a company matter in the sense that if you have a massive company, like, I don't really know a whole lot about it, like Boeing, right? That's a huge, massive company that does lots of different things. Could it be project-based at all, or would it have to be functional or a matrix? Just in the sense that it's just so large, there's just so many people. How do you not departmentalize at that point?
Any thoughts on that? There are two questions inherent in what Megan just asked. What about big companies versus small companies? Can they still be functional or projectized or matrixed? Does that apply to small companies? And number two, if the company is really large, can it get away with being just one or the other? What do you think? Mark?
To the first one, I think a matrix company would probably be a large company. If you were a small company, you wouldn't have enough depth to create a function.
Depends on your definition of small. That's true. Yeah.
If it was under 50 folks, I don't think it would be functional and project.
Might not make sense to have that much supervision that you're paying for in a 50-person company. I agree, because you're paying for all those functional managers. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. So there's a consideration there. What about large companies? Are there large construction companies, residential construction companies that are fully projectized? I don't know how many, but there are some big residential construction companies out there where it can be completely projectized. So does the size of the company matter? I would say no. It depends upon the nature of the company, going back to Gopal's point. All right. Megan, go ahead.
Sorry, one other question. But what about, you might have all these projects leading into throughout that big residential construction company, but what about like a finance department that's associated with that, that's doing all the billing? And I'm thinking of that back end part that is operational and functional and make sure that people get their bills and our contractors are paid on time.
So does Boeing probably have a finance department or of some organization inside of it that handles payments by customers, paychecks for employees, all sorts of things like that? Do they? Yeah, they probably do. So is that organization part of the functional component of the company? Yes, it is. It is part of the functional component of the company. So does Boeing have both, purely functional parts of its company, purely project parts of its company? Lockheed Martin's a better example. Lockheed Martin has certainly totally functional elements like personnel, HR, or finance. They also have something called the Skunk Works, which is completely projectized. Parts of Lockheed Martin that produced the stealth fighter and the B-1 bomber and some of those things. Those people are dedicated to that projectized organization known as Skunk Works. It's a part of the company that works strictly on producing new cutting-edge aircraft. And they don't worry about anything else. They don't worry about nothing. Those people are assigned and they're staying there as part of that project, purely projectized. Okay, Gopal, please. Yeah. No, I haven't been hearing them. Do I need to do something? Okay, Catherine, go ahead, please. Okay, very good. Jay, we're going to need to multiply that volume by about 10. Can you do that? And Catherine, can you say something else in just a minute? We can barely hear you here. Barely hear you. And I don't think it's on your end. Jay, can you do anything else? Catherine, go ahead. It's still the same, Jay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. Catherine and I are going to work on this volume issue, and Jay are going to work on this volume issue. Let's take a break. It is 6:33, and if you'll rejoin me about 6:43, I've got some slides here that I think you're going to enjoy, and then some other discussions that we're going to enjoy too. I want to take a look at the articles that you may have had a chance to read, and we'll keep going, okay? Very good. See you in about 10. Catherine? So Dilbert, or the writer of Dilbert, was indeed a project manager, and so presents some really good examples of what not to do. Did everyone have a chance to read this joke? Yeah? Take a look? Okay, very good. All right, so I'm going to do a quick review by slide, but let me ask, were there any more questions or comments you wanted to bring up? If so, we go ahead and address them. If not, then I will press. Gopal?
So would I be wrong in generalizing a cost center in a company as primarily functional?
Okay, so in your words, define cost center. And, and by the way, if you all don't know what a cost center is, this is important. It's terminology that you need because it will be used at the conference room table. Most of what you learn in this course will be valuable just because in business and industry you can sit at the conference room table and know what's going on. I wish I had this course before I left CU and gone out into the real world. But go ahead, Gopal. What is a cost center?
The cost center, in my opinion, is a department that primarily does supportive work to an actual product that the company sells.
What's an example of a cost center in a company?
HR, IT, finance, accounting.
So basically, we have to use part of our revenue to pay IT, finance, and all the rest because we need them, hence the term a cost center. It costs us to run that organization, but we have to have it. You know, it's an organ of the company. Okay, go ahead.
So the question is, would those departments be primarily functional? I
wouldn't equate them. But I would say it's a good start in terms of defining their role in a company. So what you're saying is, okay, so the company, we use an analogy of a human body. And so the muscles carry out some work that we do. Okay? But the organs, we need each of them because each of them has a specific task that helps the body function as a whole. And so is each of them necessary? Do we have to use... do we have to keep them healthy? And do they provide a service for the company so that the muscles can do their work? Yeah. So I wouldn't put an equal sign. I would put an equal sign with a squiggly above it. Approximates. Okay. Does that make sense? Good question. Thank you. So we're going to do a quick review. We talked about strategy the first time out of the block and the projects and how they relate to the company's strategy. I told you that the projects are the means by which the company accomplishes its strategic objectives. So strategic management, cross-functional decisions that enable an organization to achieve its objectives. Vision and mission statements, yes, we covered all of that before. Achieving objectives. Projects are stepping stones to the accomplishment of corporate strategy. This is just a review. The firm's strategic development is the driving force behind project development. What does that mean? That means whatever strategy we come up with as to where the company is going should determine the projects that we choose. So Drew is our CEO, and Drew says we're going to go this way. And everybody else says, okay, we need to go find work in that area so we develop our strength in that particular area where the company wants to grow. So the projects are the means by which we accomplish the company's strategic objectives. So the second bullet under a firm wishing to, if we want to change strategic direction or product portfolio, in other words, produce a different kind of product, that's exactly the example I just gave. Drew says we're going this way, we're going to be developing some new products, and so we're going to need to create new product lines, which means we're going to need to run some projects to develop those products. So Apple says, another example, in the same vein. So Apple says, is Apple getting into cars? That was a rumor.
Still a rumor.
Is it still a rumor? Apple was going to develop cars? I don't know. But let's say Apple wants to get into developing self-driving automobiles. Okay? They're going to need to create some teams that learn how to design and build automobiles. They're going to have to hire specialists from outside the company, build these teams, and learn how to build systems, the brake system, the power system, power transfer system, all the other systems, electrical system for the automobile. And they're going to need to run projects in order to grow in those areas so that eventually they might be able to produce an automobile. So, in the case up here, the company wants to create a new product line and change their strategic direction or modify it. In order to create the new product line, projects will be the vehicle by which they gain the technical expertise to build that new product. Okay, several examples there. Tell me if you don't understand that. It's okay. Mohanad, you got that? No? You don't understand what I'm saying?
I was distracted.
Okay, all right. Very good. Okay, project manager and functional manager. Take a look at this. I don't know that you've seen this slide before. Here's the project manager. We talked a little bit about the project manager. The project manager is skilled in synthesis. She is the integrator, the bringing together, the conductor of the orchestra. Do you remember that analogy? Good. Thank you, Abdul. Skilled in synthesis, the bringing together of several disciplines in order to create a team that will build this product or service. Okay? These distinctions are important. I don't put these slides up here to bore you. Really, I don't. I know it's like, give me a break. But actually, this is important because these distinctions are important at the conference room table. If you're walking down the hallway, you have a conversation with the CEO, they expect you to know the difference between a functional manager and a project manager. That's why this slide's up here. The functional manager is skilled in analysis. Analysis is the breaking apart. So if I'm a functional manager in a company, and let's say I'm in charge of electrical engineering in my company. So everybody who does electrical things comes under my purview. I'm responsible for their pay. I'm responsible for their professional development, for their training in their specialty area, for their promotions, and all that good stuff that makes them a great electrical engineer. That's my job as a functional manager. My job is to break what they need into pieces and make sure that all the pieces fit. So I'm skilled in analysis. I look at things analytically, as in breaking down into pieces. You are looking at things as a system. How is it all going to fit together? But if you go talk with this person, you need to know that this is where their brain is sitting. They're different from you. You understand all the interrelated components from all the specialties that work on your project. This person just works on finance. Or they handle the scheduling of all the equipment and facilities of the company. They have one focus. You're looking at putting all the pieces together. You're a generalist, and you have some technical competence, enough technical competence to have credibility with your team, where you don't look like a fool. They are the in-depth expert. They've been working at the company for 20 years, 25 years. They look something like me. They generally have, their name tag says curmudgeon. That means I'm an old, crusty person, and I give everybody a hard time. I hate everybody. Okay? Everybody comes in my office is an enemy. That's what. Okay. So that's what this person is. Okay? And you have to break down that barrier in order to be so that you make a friend out of an enemy. Abdul?
So in a project organization, can we say all the functional managers report to the project manager?
In a projectized organization?
Yes.
I would say possibly. If you're in a projectized organization, it means that the project managers are a god with a small g. I'm not insulting anyone here, okay? They're the top. They are the most powerful people in the company, except for the executive level staff and the CEO. Okay, this is a projectized organization. We use the example in construction of a general contractor. They are the boss of the boss. They are the jefe. They're the most powerful person on that project. And so do these people report to them? Possibly. So yeah, in a projectized organization, the project managers are at the top, at the very top. Project manager wants it, the functional manager jumps. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good question. All right, so they're a different kind of person. They're a different kind of person. But if you can make them your friend, this is the academic stuff. In the world, if you can make them your friend, then you will be able to get your job done. But you need their help. And we'll talk about that in a minute. In fact, we'll talk about it next lesson. Project manager. This is review. Politically sensitive? Yes or no? Why? Why, Melanie?
Because they need to bring different stakeholders from different groups. They need to understand the nuances of the existing relationship.
What is a new Melanie, back to you. What does a new project manager focus on? As opposed to a mid-level experienced project manager as opposed to a very experienced project manager. New project manager focuses on what, Melanie? This is for all the marbles. Say again? Say again?
That I feel put upon.
Oh, okay. All right. Hang on. We're going to help you. All right, Alex, new project manager focuses on?
Team. The
team. Okay, now you remember that. So a mid-level project manager generally focuses on?
Money.
And senior project manager knows that the king of all kings is politics. Politics. All right. Does a project manager, thank you, Melanie, does a project manager need technical skills? We had this long discussion before. Thomas, what do you think?
To a certain level.
Extrapolate.
Enough to ask the right questions and enough to question the answers.
Good answer. Thank you. Would you all agree? Obviously you would, because I said it's a good answer. Sorry. I blew that one. Sorry. But good answer, Thomas. Thank you. All right. Does the project manager have strong problem orientation? Are they focused on the challenges associated with accomplishing their project? Yes, Dana? How focused?
Pretty focused, but in a foresight type of way. You're seeing the problems that may happen before they do.
Hence the idea of staying about 2 weeks or more in front of the rest of the project team in terms of being aware of what's going on. Very good. Strong goal orientation, yes. High self-esteem, why? Drew, why does a project manager need high self-esteem? That is, I'm confident, but I'm not arrogant. Why does that apply to a project manager? See, I'm telling you this, Drew, so you can self-assess and say, I'm that person.
Self-esteem is pretty important when you keep on track to making progress towards the end. You don't keep on yourself and have high self-esteem. you'll tend to second guess yourself and kind of wander around instead of driving towards the end goal.
Good, good. Let me ask a question of Catherine. Catherine's on Zoom. Catherine, so Drew just said a project manager needs high self-esteem. Okay, I'm not beating a dead horse here. This is important. Because if you don't, then like bad things happen, like ulcers and stuff like that. Why does the project manager need high self-esteem? Because there are these people all around the project who have an interest in the outcome of the project. Any idea what we call those people? Right on. We call them stakeholders. And in the ideal project, you'll remember this story, all the stakeholders are like babies in a nursery, and we want them all crying equally loudly, because we will not be able to satisfy any of them perfectly, although we aspire to. But we are catching, how do I say this, Moad? When I say we're catching grief, it means everybody wants to give, you're the project manager, everybody wants to give you a hard time. Everyone wants to make you feel bad. Dana's your CEO, she's saying, You're over budget right now. What's the deal? Can't you run your project? Julie is the local congressperson, and she is interested in this because she wants information from you so she can look like she knows about this big new project in her district, and she can pronounce that she wants to get credit for that. So she's after you, okay? Nina represents your team. You're pushing your team. Your team, we're going to talk about this in a future lesson, you've had your team sign off on what's called a work breakdown structure. And everybody's got a job, and on that work breakdown structure it says how much money you got, when you're going to start, when you're going to finish, and you have your team members, those in charge, sign off on it. Nina represents the team. Nina comes to you and says, you know, we're behind on this. We need more time. Or I have a personal things going on at home, and I need to leave. And so there's your team, okay? Here's the other project. Ken represents the other project managers. They don't like you because you went and made friends with the functional managers, and they're giving you everything that you want, okay? And now Ken is jealous because he sees you as taking some of his resources. And everybody's after Moad, okay? That is why you need this high self-esteem, so that, Catherine, go ahead. Oh, yes. Well said. Yes, if you walk around as project manager, exactly right, hanging your head, what's your team going to do? You know, if you're moping around and your shoulders are folded in and woe is me, and we got so much work to do, we're never going to get it. You know, yeah, your team will mimic you. Thank you, Catherine. So all these people, Moad, that are pulling at you, all these stakeholders, you have to be able to service them. Tell the CEO it's going to be okay. I got a plan for the fact that I ran over. Give the information to your state representative so that they can claim that they're on top of this new project that employs so many people in their district. Tell your team these are the standards right up front during the kickoff meeting. Take your fellow project manager out to lunch and tell him you'll introduce him to the functional managers. Keep everybody happy as best you can, but at the same time, if you can't keep everybody, and this is important, you must let it wash off of you when you leave the building, or even before you leave the building. Not everybody's going to love you. You're a leader, but you're a leader times 10, okay? You are now a big person on campus as a project manager. And so people look up to you, but they're also jealous of you. Some of them may hate you. Some of them may not be happy with you. The best project manager is, in my opinion, and you can tell them I told you this, is someone who's always ready to lose their job. In other words, you've already made the decision in your mind that if I lose this job, it's okay. I'll get a job somewhere else doing the same thing. Why? Because I have high self-esteem. Because I know in my heart of hearts I'm a good woman or I'm a good man. And I'm not going to let this affect my life. Why? Because I'm a good woman or I'm a good man. And when you drive home at night, you're going to turn on the radio and you're going to make sure that you're not white-knuckled on the steering wheel because you haven't let go of it all. I see project managers burn themselves out. And it happens. Good, solid people like you all, because they were unable to separate their professional selves, everybody pulling on you, from who they are as human beings. So at the same time, you're loyal to the company and emotionally involved in your project, wanting to do good, taking care of your team, and being a good part of the company. At the same time, you have to be strong enough inside to say, if it all comes apart, it's okay. Totally focused, like a laser beam, but if it comes apart, it's okay. That's really tough, you know? It's kind of like a relationship. You know, you're in love with somebody, but if it doesn't work out, you're going to be okay as a human being, you know? So it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance that goes on, if you know what that term means. It means I have two conflicting ideas in my head at the same time. But one must do that in order to stay sane when you have 1,000 things in your mind working all together at the same time. Some of you have written me, some of the distance students have written me and said that, you know, I don't know if I want to be a project manager. And if so, that's okay. It's a tough job. Generally, the pay is about 10% more, 10 or 15% more than you know, if you had just a job as an engineer on that project. Same rank, same experience. You get the project manager, your pay is about 10 to 15% higher, generally speaking. You get a lot more responsibility. You get a lot more respect. But it's also a lot of weight that you're carrying in your backpack, right? So that's okay. So there's a reason I'm going through this, is it's very much like being a parent. All these same things apply to being a parent, if you hadn't made that connection. You understand trade-offs. There is no perfect answer. If you want a perfect answer, you know, go work in a functional area. Maybe you can find a perfect answer there. Project leadership is all about trade-offs. We don't find an optimal solution. Well, actually, we do find optimal solutions, but there's no perfect answer. Strong communicator. Smile on your face. When you're driving to work, same as anything else, you just had a fight with your significant other, car's not working well, ain't had time to take it in for service, and my tummy's not feeling good, okay, because I had some bad coffee on the way. Doesn't matter. You walk in, smile on your face, head up, shoulders back, let's rock and roll, okay, because that's what your team expects of you, and they will, as Catherine said, they will mimic you. All right. And strong negotiator, we're going to talk about that next time. Dilbert? You know, there's so much truth in this. Has anybody ever heard this? These things? I mean, it's almost like, anyway. So, yeah, whoever, the guy who writes Dilbert has been there and done that. And I've certainly had that statement said to me before. And you know what? If they want to do that, it's okay. That's where this thing, high self-esteem, comes in. Because you know you're good. You know you're good because you've had this class, or you've gotten a certificate here, or you've gotten a degree here. You know your stuff. You know what's right. And if someone is stepping out of line, even your boss, it's okay. It's all right. And you can respond by saying, you have the right to replace me anytime you want. And if you can get those words out of your mouth without your voice shaking, that's a good thing. And just leave it at that. It's okay. Sometimes bullies have to be pushed back against. I talked about the ability to handle stress without passing it on. This is still review. Comfortable with cultural differences. Not many projects nowadays that aren't multinational, which means you're dealing with cultural issues. I had a gentleman from a country in the Far East one time. We were talking in this class, and we were talking about, somehow we were talking about graft or something like that. And he raised his hand, and he said, in my country, it's not considered graft unless the payoff is more than $1,000 American. In other words, political officials, it was okay in his country to pay the political official. That was what was expected. You want an audience with a local representative. You don't just make an appointment. You make an appointment. You have your $1,000 or whatever your payoff is, and you have the appointment. And that's just part of their income, and it's an expected part of their culture. Cultural differences you have to know them before you start the project. And maybe we'll have the time to talk about this later, but it's a topic all unto itself. If you're going to be working with people from other countries, you need to find other project managers who have worked with them. Or if you're from another country and you're working with Americans, you need to figure out how the heck we think. Because we think we know everything. So, Ken?
How does that correlate with corporate governance? If you're a U.S. company, there's a lot of requirements, saying how you deal with political figures. But let's say if you are working with a multinational project,
yep,
you need local support. Isn't that kind of breaking your corporate policies?
You mean what if the different cultures allow different activity or different approaches to solving problems and things like that? I think, here's what I think. I think that you cannot break the laws of the United States. Okay, that's first. And you cannot allow your company to do that, even though your CEO may say, or someone may say, oh, it's okay, we've done this before. You can't do it. Because when push comes to shove, your rear end will be on the line. Do you know what I mean by that, Moed? It means that if Julie, as our state representative, discovers that there's improper activity on our project, and it's discovered by the local newspaper, and they start writing about it, and people start asking questions about who did this illegal activity, what happens is there's what I call the fickle finger of blame. Okay? It's a finger that wanders through the hallway looking for somebody to blame. And you'll hear people talking about it in the hallway. Well, I think it's Nina's fault. No, I think it's Drew's fault. I think it's Ken. Ken's the project manager. It's his fault, ultimately. So there's this fickle, which means it can't make up its mind. Finger of blame. Who's it going to land on? And so ultimately it lands on the project manager. So you have to hold the line, even though the company may be willing to bend. Can't break the laws of the United States. And all of the issues that you can come up with from a list that you've created with other project managers who have worked with people from that country before, you make a long list. And you cover each of them during your initial kickoff meetings with the representative of your team present and the representatives of their team present. Take care of it up front. And if there are going to be issues, you know, if the project manager from another country has issues, they'll say, that's not how we work. And then you say, okay, that's good. I've made a note of it here. Let's take it offline and talk about it later. Me and you. And then continue down your list. What you'll end up with is a few areas where there's a discrepancy between the way you operate and the way MOAD operates. Okay? And then you can sit down one-on-one, offline, on the phone, or by Skype, or something like that, and work out a method where he can satisfy his needs and you can stay clear of the law. Project manager always gets blamed. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, good question. All right. Never allow senior management to be surprised. I don't think we discussed this last time. There are some really good lessons here, and I'll discuss one of them. Something goes wrong on your project, okay? What was the example I used in systems engineering?
I don't think I remember.
The circuit board.
Oh, yeah.
The dropped circuit board. $300,000 circuit board. Expensive circuit board. You're running, because your project is behind schedule, you're running 24-hour operations, otherwise known as 3/8. Okay? 8 hours, new team comes in, 8 hours, new team comes in, 8 hours, 24-hour operation. Somebody in the middle of the night drops this circuit board and breaks it. Okay? I mean, it's in pieces. And so now it's like, uh-oh, what do we do? So this is known, well, it's known by several things, several terms, but you're in a crisis situation now because who's going to pay for it and who's going to get blamed for it? But what you don't want, you can put this in your journal, what you don't want is for somebody to immediately call up the CEO in the middle of the night and say, oh crap, I'm sorry sir, I dropped the circuit board. Or I'm sorry ma'am, we're screwed, this whole project is screwed. Okay, which is what an engineer might say. So if something goes wrong, this is part of your communication plan, and we'll discuss this later in communication. But that's what you don't want. What you want is for them to notify the people in the chain of command. Notify the supervisor, that person's supervisor. Supervisor then notifies the systems engineer or chief engineer on the project, and you. You have a limited period of time to figure out what you're going to tell the company leadership. This does not mean that you make up a story. What it means is you figure out the facts, what happened, why it happened, what could have been done better, and what your plan is for the future. Not only for making sure that accident doesn't happen again, but also what are you going to do about the cost and schedule impact of a new circuit board. So that when who was our CEO before? Dana. When we go brief Dana, you know, we already have the answers to what the CEO is going to ask us. She's going to say, you know, she's going to get red in the face, and she's going to say, why did this happen? You need an answer to that question. She's going to ask, who's to blame? Because the first thing to look for is somebody to blame. We'll talk about that in a minute. The next question is, what are you going to do to prevent this in the future? Actually, what she's going to say is, assuming, with her hands on her hips, she's going to say, assuming the company is willing to pay for this, and I don't know if I will, because it's probably going to come out of your paycheck. What are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? You have an answer for that question. How can we handle the cost associated with and the schedule impact? You have an answer to that. Okay? Those are the questions you're going to get asked. But you need to know about it before everybody else, which is why you keep your cell phone on your nightstand next to your bed at night if you're running 24-hour ops. And text message is normally the best way to do it, as in, we've had an issue, call. And you call the chief engineer, you talk about what happened, you say, okay, let's meet at the company in 1 hour. Everybody gets a shower, goes to the company in the middle of the night. You figure out how you're going to answer these questions, and then contact the CEO depending on what company policy is. Call them in the middle of the night or catch them when they come in first thing in the morning. That's all part of your communication plan, because stuff will happen on your project.
What the consequences if the team or contact directly the CEO?
Well, if the CEO finds out first, the CEO will then call you and start yelling on the phone. And that doesn't help anybody. Okay, CEOs are not designed like your design, which is calm like the surface of a pond. Okay, CEOs are designed to do this, spike. Okay, so that's what will happen, and you'll probably get fired, and fired for, at least from the project and maybe from the company, and all sorts of bad things happen. You want to be the one to walk in. Now the question is, who's to blame? This is not rhetorical. This is to you. On a project, Catherine, I'm hitting you with this cold, but something goes wrong on the project, who's responsible? You would say the project manager. What if there's negligence on the part of the engineer? Engineer or technician, take your pick. Okay, if there are good policies in place, so I'm the technician, okay, and there are good policies in place, good procedures in place, I know about them, I've been trained, but I make the mistake anyway because I don't follow procedures. Am I to blame? Absolutely. You got ready to disagree. Go ahead, Catherine. Okay. All right, very good. So there may be other circumstances to be taken into account. We want to avoid jumping to conclusions immediately. You'd agree with that? Okay, very good. All right, the stakeholders, real quick, this is just introduction. We're going to spend a whole lesson on this later. People who know your project exists and have expressed an interest, people who know it exists and don't know it can benefit them, people who are unaware of your project but are associated with it, are all stakeholders. Also look for people who oppose your project. You may have members of your executive leadership who don't think your project should exist in your company. Opposition. Figure out why they oppose your project and whether you can address their concerns. There may be ways to mitigate their effect on your project. Okay. Good. Let's continue. All right. Individuals or group, active stake, positive or negative in your project. I'm going to go through this quickly. So there are your stakeholders. Moad, there are your stakeholders on the screen. Okay, the ones we talked about. Your upper level management, the state representative, which was Julie, Where's the team at? There's Nina, the team, other project managers, the functional managers. Your customer is a big stakeholder, finance, so on. So ideally, we build relationships with all of those. So I think we're going to move now into lesson 4. That was our review. So if you were building a company and needed to conduct projects to achieve the company's objectives, how would you go about doing it? I think we've talked about this question. I think we've discussed it. Yeah, this is a good question. Why is organizational structure important to a project manager? I think we've discussed that too. In that it's important to know where you stand. In a functional organization, project manager doesn't have much power at all. Gopal, did you ask that question about the power of a project manager?
No, I asked about how to come up with an organization.
Who asked that question? Abdul? You asked that question. Okay, thank you, Abdul. But in a fully projectized organization, you may have total power. And the functional managers may be reporting to you saying, what do you need? What do you need? The example I gave was at Lockheed Martin. What's the name of that organization? Skunk Works. Yeah. Totally projectized. So it's important to know where you stand in terms of power. How do you relate with functional managers? And how do you relate with all of those people? You may say, Thomas, you may say, I'm just a guy here, I'm just trying to do a job. Yeah, okay, I get that, But in a company, it's important to understand the power relationships. You may not exercise them. You may not walk in saying, I own you. You do what I say. No, we're not going to do that. But it's important to understand when you walk into somebody's office, what are the power relationships? This is part of politics in a company. In order to survive politics, one needs to know where the power resides. Go ahead. Go ahead, Catherine. Yes. Informal leadership. Who has it? Faisal, you're nodding. Do you know what that means? Informal leadership. So we have the formal leaders, like, okay, let's use my example. So I'm supposed to be the teacher of this class, and because of my incredible knowledge, and I was supposed to be a laughter kind of thing. But because of the teacher's knowledge and their position and things like that, there's a certain amount of formal leadership. But then there are informal leaders within the class. People who, because of charisma or because of personality or because of they know the answers, they become informal leaders in the class. Dana?
I wanted to bring up this last point here. Where do people go when they're not working on a project? So finish your thought, but that's a super important question if you're in a consulting environment.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll answer that in just a moment. So they're informal leaders. And what Catherine is getting at is that informal leaders have influence on the group too. Okay? So what she's saying is it's important for you to understand who the informal leaders in your project and in the company are, because they will also have an effect. They will sway the opinions of people on your team and people within the company. Does that make sense, Julie? Okay. Thank you, Catherine. All right, so I need to get into structure here. So functional organizations, actually stand by. So where do project managers go when they're not working on projects?
Project staff. So at most consulting companies, you have a certain billability rate. You're supposed to maintain billing on projects 80 or more % of the time. But if a project ends and there's not a new project coming up that's a perfect fit for you, what happens? If you sit around on overhead, your boss really doesn't like that.
Okay, so here, let's say here are your projects in squares. These are projects. And here are your functional organizations as circles. Okay, so you may have an electrical engineer over here. They go back to the electrical engineering organization when they're not working on a project. Project managers go to some place called a PMO, a project management organization, normally overseen by the senior project manager in the company. And what do they do when they go there? Well, one thing they do is they rest, because projects, as I think I've described, can be a burnout activity. So they go there to rest and recuperate. They also go there to train, to become better project managers, to improve their skills in certain areas, and to prepare for their next project. Essentially, they do the same thing as all the other specialties. They go back and they train and they become better and get to go on their next project, ideally. The problem is, if you're not working on a project, where does the money come from to pay your paycheck? This is what you're getting at.
Yep.
And when you're not working on a project, where does the money come from to pay your paycheck? Let's say you're a project manager and you're making somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 a year. So where does your pay come from, Nina?
Isn't that already budgeted into the yearly financial stuff? Like as overhead? Like your salary's already added in?
Yeah, the answer is overhead, because that's money that the company has set aside for those down periods. This is very general conversation. It's actually much more complicated than this. But generally, the company has a certain amount of overhead set aside for you as a project manager while you're resting and recuperating before you go on to your next project, in an ideal world. But they can't leave you sitting there too long, because you're draining the company's discretionary overhead. You're draining that extra money in the bank that they had set aside for you. Okay? Same thing for electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, roofers on a construction project, what have you. So that's called not having a charge number. You need to know that term. If you work for a business or industry, ideally you have a charge number, which means that you have a project against which you can charge your time. If you don't have that, then you have an overhead charge number, and it's called riding overhead. Well, what's Diana doing right now? She's riding overhead, which means you're getting paid off a company overhead or overhead money. Okay, you're riding overhead. Not always will project managers get a break, though. Many times you get taken off of one project, you'll get to come off of one battle, go right into another battle, go right into another battle.
Multiples going at the same time.
Or have multiple projects going at the same time, and they're just riding you as hard as they can. It's not a pleasant situation. You like to have a little bit of time to rest and recuperate. But that's ideally, you go back to the PMO. Some companies don't have a PMO. You may have a few days off before they put you right back into another project. Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay, functional organizations perform activities similar to departments, if you've heard that term before. Project organizations group people into project teams. matrix organization, as I drew on the board, a dual hierarchy in which functions and projects work together. Okay, we've got to get to organizations here. All right, here is your functional organization. You all have described it correctly already. What I've done here is take your thoughts and put it on the screen. So let's see if we can see what this is. So what was that? What were the functional organizations you all came up with? Somebody give me one that we talked about.
HR.
HR is one, okay. Manufacturing, okay. So you use the example, Anne, of manufacturing.
Yeah.
Saying it's simply, and everyone's got their specific silo in which they're working. And so here's manufacturing, here's finance, here's HR, and so on. And they have staffs that work for them. This is a classic functional organization. Okay. If we were going to run a project in this functional organization, is it possible to pull representatives from these staffs and create an ad hoc project? Of course. So can one have projects within companies that are functionally organized? Yes. Certainly, we can pull those people in gray boxes out. All right, let's continue. Just want you to understand this. Okay, projectized organizations. Got nothing but projects. The example we used was construction. I think Faisal brought it up. And then Gopal maybe expanded on it. Construction project, construction project, construction project. We hire these specialty areas. Maybe they're independent. We hire them in to work on the project. Okay? Projectized organization. Chief executive running a construction organization. Got various construction projects going on. Straightforward? Okay. Please?
In a project organization, would you have someone doing accounting in each project then?
You could. You could. Accounting, finance, budgeting, submitting proposals for future projects, yes. Hang on. Hang on a second. I've been wanting to use this for a while. Look at that baby. You know, you can burn a hole with that thing. All right. So you might have a small staff up here around the chief executive, proposals, finance, but you know, those kind of things we talked about. You could have a small staff here. You could still have a projectized organization. Okay, it's called projectized. Okay, or if you don't like that, you can get consultants, pay them by the hour to handle your HR, your finance. You can even hire people to submit proposals for you. You got an attorney, you can hire an attorney on an hourly basis. So you could simply hire the other people when you need them. They can be on call. 2 ways to do that and still have a projectized organization. Does that answer your question? Good. All right. So a weak matrix organization. This looks a lot like that. There's your functional organization. We'll get to the significance of this in just a minute before we break. But I just want to graphically show you so it's like, yeah, I get it. All right, so here's our functionally organized organization. Oh, Lord, it's dying. Okay, and... Okay, so we can have a project in there, but this is a weak matrix organization. Strong means projectized, weak means more functional. And generally, for this type of organization, we'd have what's called a project coordinator. They're not a project manager. It's important for you to know the difference. As stated in Mulcahy, the difference between project coordinator, project manager. Faisal, you have a question?
No.
Okay, very good. All right. So normally a project coordinator in a functional organization. Okay? So here we have a balanced. Here we have pulled people and actually established a formal project manager. Here, the project manager and the functional managers have equal power. Remember that word? Power relationships are important in a company. You need to know where you stand. So here we've established a formal project manager in a balanced matrix. Project manager and functional manager have equal power. Here, the project coordinator doesn't have as much power as a functional manager. Okay. Can we have several projects ongoing within the project? Yes, we can. Here we have a project manager with representatives of this functional area, this functional area, this functional area. They all working for this project manager. And here we have the PMO, the Project Management Office. As I said, not all companies have PMOs. They have a lot of discretionary money. They're flush. They got to have a lot of money. They'll have a PMO. If not, one of the first things that gets cut is the PMO. So, in a strong matrix organization, let's review. Who has the most power, project manager or functional manager? In a strong matrix. Project manager. Agreed. In a weak matrix, who has the most power? Melanie? Functional managers have the most power. And in a balanced organization, who's got the most power, Moad? Equal. Thank you. Okay, there's also something known as a composite organization. Okay? What does Mulcahy say about this? Does she speak to composite or hybrid organizations in your reading? Say again?
Hybrid, just hybrid.
Hybrid. What is a hybrid organization? If you don't know, check it out. Nina?
It has both matrix or functional and project-based organizations.
Or the previous one.
Say again?
The weak and the equal power and
Okay, so what you're saying, it can have, here we have a full project, here we have simply a project coordinator. So what you're saying is, wait a minute, over here we have a project coordinator that doesn't have much power, but it's working within a functional organization. So let's say this is electrical engineering or power engineering in a company. And this is the electrical engineering functional manager. Or if you don't like that, how about finance? Okay, finance. Could finance have a project to upgrade its computers or to install a new system, finance accounting system? Sure it could. Sure it could. They may not have the power of a project manager. So here we've got a project coordinator. But over here in the same company, we've got a project manager with full-up project manager power. Okay. So here is a summary. And I'm not going to go through all of this because we've already discussed it. In a functional organization, project manager has little or no authority. In a projectize, total authority. In a strong matrix, project manager's got more power. In a weak matrix, project manager's got less power. Resources. Who controls resources, the project manager or the functional manager? Say functional. Functional manager controls the resources. In a projectized organization, the project manager says what, I want this. Faisal says, I'm the project manager, I need this. Functional manager is responding as quickly as possible. Okay? In a functional organization, the functional manager controls the resources, and the project coordinator normally is begging. You're like Oliver in the story, please, sir, may I have some resources? I really need to get this done. Okay? Controls the project budget. Functional manager here in a functional organization, project manager over here. Project manager's full-time in a projectized organization, and in a strong matrix, and in a balanced matrix. In a weak matrix, you're only going to be part-time. So that's a quick summary of what we've talked about. We talked about Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, as you see on the second line up there. Project manager has total control. And project management offices, we've talked about this. The PMO is where we keep all the lessons learned from previous projects. It's died. Would you let me shine this? It's gone. Need some more batteries. This is where we keep our lessons learned. This is where we train project managers to bring them up to speed, make them stronger and better. It's the Center for Project Management Excellence. Many large companies have this. Lockheed Martin has it. Boeing has it. I think probably Covidien may have it. Smaller companies with less money may not have this. But it's good repository, especially for lessons learned. Okay. All right. We got about 10 minutes. And let me ask what your questions are. Mark?
I have one administrative question.
Yes?
Around the project teams, where do we find the email addresses for the distance?
The email addresses for distant students. If you look in, let me see if I can call this up for you, okay? I'll show you exactly where it's at. Stand by. Because has everyone had a chance to see which project team they're on?
They're on our class list.
Yeah, I was looking at the class list and I didn't.
You can find it under communication.
Yeah, but the distant students are in a different section technically, so they're not under our class list that we can see.
Oh, I see.
Oh, good.
Go to the discussion.
That's going to be great.
Yeah.
So normally it's found here. Now, I have access to everybody. But what you're saying is you don't.
That list isn't the same as what's...
Yeah.
Good.
In fact, even first name isn't there.
Well, Catherine's the first one on our list here.
Faisal is first.
On your list. Okay. All right. So we have a information availability problem. Okay. I will take care of that. Good. Thank you. Other questions? All right. Then let's talk about the project really quickly. And then we'll get out of here. This project at the end of the course is not meant to be a pain or simply another graded exercise because I need graded exercises for your grades. It's actually meant to give you hands-on, in-depth knowledge for each of the functional areas, each of the knowledge areas. There are 10 knowledge areas in project management, and we're going to spend, a lesson on each one of them. The first one being integration, which is primarily the project manager's job. If we have 6 people on the team and we pull one of them out and make them the leader, we have 5 team members left. Ideally, each of those 5 team members would have responsibility for writing about 2 knowledge areas. 2 times 5 equals 10, total number of knowledge areas. That's why 6 is a good number. The project lead here, I'm hoping, will take responsibility for reviewing what's written, for keeping track of the schedule, making sure the team stays on track, and will provide consistency in the write-ups. In other words, Faisal's writing, Nina's writing, Julie's writing, and Drew is the project lead, then Drew can make sure that there's consistency among all 3. And can also assemble the final written product. What about the project that you're working on? I believe I've given you under Administration and Logistics in the D2L area. If you look at the bottom of the list, it says sample, or it says project, team project, and under that there are samples. I think there are 6 in there of good projects that were done in the past. You can choose anything to work on that you and your team want to work on. It can be a bathroom remodel. It can be putting in a new garden this spring. It can be setting up. One team a couple years ago had an idea for selling Australian crayfish as pseudo-lobsters to local restaurants. True, and they actually did the business. After they left the class, they actually a guy set it up in Nebraska. Apparently these Australian crayfish are really big, and they're almost like lobsters, and if you cook them up the same way, they taste kind of like lobsters. So his idea was he was going to sell these grow them, right? Culture them and grow them in Nebraska and sell them to local restaurants as a substitute for lobster at a much reduced cost. And you could even say locally grown lobster in quotes. So that was a project that the team came up with. So there are all kinds of ideas. If you have an idea, you can present it to your team. Team leader. 2 other things and then we'll go. The team leader needs to be someone who has an ability to provide good leadership for the team. Okay? So you want to choose somebody who may not want to do the job, but has the skills of being a good, calm leader who can also help to keep the team on target. That's the team leader. Team members. Listen to what I'm going to say now. Everybody needs to participate in the team meetings. Everybody needs to be an active, strong follower for the team. Distant students in class, you need to be good, strong follower, good, strong team member for the team. Be at the meetings, participate, be prepared when you come to the meeting to discuss what you're supposed to discuss. If you start missing timelines and causing difficulty for the team, that's when I get involved. And I've only had to do that a couple times, maybe 2 times in the past. But please help me out by being good, strong members of your team, especially if you're a distance student, especially if you're a distance student. I was looking at the camera talking to everybody, Catherine, not just to you, okay? All right. All right. Good. The first thing you have to do is to get a hold of your team and have a meeting. You've informed me of it. Mark's informed me of an issue. I'll find a way to get that solved. That's in my to-do list. I'll find a way to get it solved. Send out a group letter to everyone describing what we're going to do about that. Okay? All right. Other questions? Melanie.
I saw in the assessment section that there are quizzes.
No, I'm not going to do quizzes this term. All you have is the journal and the readings and the midterm and the final project. That's it. Good. I'll have to go through that and get that out of there. Where did you see it?
In
the
saw it under assessments, and then I clicked on grades, and then it was a section.
Okay, all right. I took care of it in the syllabus. I'll also pull it out of the grading section too. Thank you.
Each lesson has it. It starts from lesson 6.
Yes, yes, I remember. Yeah, I'm not going to run those this term. Good, thank you.
When's the midterm, and what do we have? Is it like an exam, an essay, paper?
Normally the midterm is, and in fact we'll do it this way this term, is about lesson 7 or lesson 8, depending on how we're doing. Lesson 7 or lesson 8, right about the middle of the term, and it's essay. It'll be an essay exam.
Essay in class.
No, good question. It'll be a take-home exam. You'll have several days to take it. I don't know how many you'll have, but 4, 5, 6, 7 days to take the exam. Did that answer your question?
Okay, so it's an essay, and you'll give us 7 days, the topic or whatever that you...
I will give you a number of days. I can't guarantee 7.
All right.
Okay, good. Other questions? Final project, no final exam. Have we talked about the journal in here?
Yes.
Okay, we have. So we have an idea what's required in the journal. All right, what is our topic for next time? Is it conflict and negotiation?
Integration.
I think we had, this is only lesson 4. I think
It's a conflict and negotiation.
Okay, and this is going to be an important one because I want you to at least have some thoughts about how to manage the conflict that is inherent in a matrix organization. I want you to be able to go out and make friends and then handle the negotiation. I'm not going to make you a negotiation expert, but we will talk through the principles. You know, I wish we could include a negotiation class as an elective in this program. It'd be so valuable. Other questions? Okay, everyone. Be safe. Good job tonight. Thank you so much. Catherine, good having you here. We appreciate it. Everyone have a nice evening, okay? See you next time.